the big man, he ought to think twice when he draws up his list. Who's naughty or nice? Oh yes, I've been up to the North Pole, been every year since he gave me coal. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the way she curls her toes. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the big man's out now. Oh, Mrs. Claus, under mistletoe. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the big man's out now. On Christmas Eve, what a special day, up at Santa's house when he goes away. He's on your rooftop and he's under your tree, but what he doesn't see is cookies are for me. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the way she curls her toes. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the big man's out now. Oh, Mrs. Claus, under mistletoe. Oh, 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 Mrs. Claus, the big man's out now. Now it's Christmas time, but I don't wanna hear any jingle bells or your Christmas cheer. And I want you to know, I'll make it very clear, I visit Mrs. Claus only once a year. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the way she curls her toes. Oh, Mrs. Claus, the big man's out now. Oh, Mrs. Claus, what a freak in the snow. Oh, 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 Mrs. Claus, the big man's out now.